Good morning, everybody. Warmest greetings from Singapore. I'm Ling, and you can call me Siew for short. I'm one of the speakers for this session, and I'll also be moderating for this session. First, we would like to thank the organizers, for inviting us to share our experiences at this summit under the presentation theme, Education for Social Responsibility. Now, our sharing session is titled Multi-Stakeholder Collaboration to Cultivate Social Responsibility, and engaging young adults in higher education to innovate behavior change solutions with under-resourced families. Now, we will be facilitating our sharing via a panel session. We want to make this session as interactive as possible, so please post your questions in a Q&A chat, and our panel members can actually respond via the chat, or we can also address some of your questions live, and we have about 10 minutes to do so later on. And to start, I'd like to invite the panel members to introduce ourselves. And maybe Yoke, would you like to go first?
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Yoke. I am a core team member of WISE, which is a non-profit organization working on social and environmental issues in Indonesia, Cambodia, and Singapore. And I'm based in Singapore.
And Julivius, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi, I'm Julivius Prawira, and you can call me Vius. I'm working with WISE full-time in research and consulting, and I'm also working as a professional serious game designer recently. So I'm involved in the second half of the project that I will tell you on later. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And Janice?
Yes, hello. So I'm Janice. I'm a social worker of Lutheran Community Care Services, LCCS. So for us, we seek to engage and empower individuals and families to build, strengthen relationships. And we do work with schools, institutions, residential homes, and also various organizations. Yeah.
Great, thanks everybody. And I'm Ling from the Office of Service Learning, College of Interdisciplinary and Experiential Learning at the Singapore University of Social Sciences, which is SUSS for short. And we also like to introduce three of our students who play a key role in this collaboration. Now, Yokpin, maybe you can go on to the next slide so that I can introduce the students who really play a key role in this collaboration. Yeah, so in this team photo, the students, unfortunately, they cannot join us today for this session as they're in the midst of the exams. So we will be sharing, on our behalf later on. And we have class one, she's the third student from the top left in the back row. And Safi, who is the second student from the top right, in the back row, and they're both social work major students. We also have Ernie, who is a public safety and security major. She's just next to class one in the picture. Second student from the top left in the back row. Now, the three of them were recruited for this project as they demonstrated keen interest and attitude to learn in a shared project scope. And as SUSS, we also wanted a cross-discipline engagement for students in this project, and that's kind of kept intentional so that we can have a different program of study of students involved. And with that broad introduction, I would like to also share the broad context for our collaboration under this pilot initiative, together with LCCS, and also WISE, under this Design for Behavior Change Community Initiative, which is DBC for short. And in this pilot effort, we have structured capacity building in behavior change, as well as community engagement elements for students to implement behavior change solutions with the guidance of WISE and LCCS. And we'll share more details about this DBC process and journey later on. And now to dive into our panel session, I thought the first question to start off with, to get our panel sharing is really what brings all of us together, and probably the first question I would like to get the panel to share your thoughts is really what motivated you and your organization to participate in DBC, and how, in what way, did your organization contribute? Maybe you'd like to start the ball rolling?
Yes, so I'll start off. So as mentioned, WISE is a non-profit organization, and one of the things that we try to do in our programs, one of the programs that we do is to equip organizations and individuals in the non-profit space to be able to do design and implement community interventions more effectively. So we do things like training, mentoring, so that people gain skills that would help them do their work more effectively, right? So when we're talking about SUSS, about how we could support their students, this was really the area we want to contribute towards students' development.
Yeah, great. Thanks. And yes, would you like to share maybe your motivations also in this project?
Yeah, sure. It's mainly I'm mentoring the students for game design, and I'm seeing kind of a trend where more young people are receptive to games, and I think games could help us to kind of change our perspective by lowering our barriers to new information or new perspective. So I guess that's why I came in as well and helped with this project.
And maybe just to
So
add
there's
some context, yeah, I think during the project also, when we saw that that the students wanted to work on designing some games, we also looked at the resources that we had within our organization to be able to help out with that. And we thankfully had staff who had game design expertise. So we brought VIS in from the Indonesia team to come and help out.
yeah, and how about Janice?
Yeah, okay, so actually how LCCS is being involved is that we do have a program that we work with under-resourced families. And through this program, we enable them to achieve upward social mobility through various aspects. And one of them is actually accumulating savings, which is the focus point of DBC, of trying to help families to encourage them to save. And the thing is, because for us, we find that DBC really aligned with the principles of relational inclusion, where we want to work with individuals, with the families, to widen their circle of support and also build connectedness in the community. And that exactly involve WISE and also, the SUSS students, where we don't want it to just become just a relationship of the social worker and, the family, but we really wanted to involve the community. That's where we saw the opportunity to collaborate with WISE and SUSS.
And maybe at this point, I can also, jump in to share maybe the SUSS perspective. I think we actually initiated this DBC, and I think our original intention was really fundamentally to expose our students, to more varied community engagement approaches. And the idea of innovation in community engagement actually scores high. Because we thought that innovation is really one of the ways where when it comes to community development, we can really empower community members and the families in this case that LCCS is working with. And it's also drawn from our prior experiences in facilitating design thinking approaches. But when it comes to design thinking approaches, that process typically stops short at the prototyping stage, and unless you really have funding and resources, to bring the prototype to fusion, and this is where I think behavior change tools really values add to the learning process for students, and also the service outcomes that would really benefit the community members that we are serving with, integrating with the design thinking approaches, and that allows our students, to implement feasible behavior change solutions that have potential to create impact, over a period of time. Yeah, and I think this is really where, as multi-stakeholders working on DBC, this is really where the intersections of our motivations really come about, and really brings us forward, and then I think I'll probably say that we all agree that it is a very human focus and endeavor, and that really brings us all together, to move through in this project itself. And
yeah, sorry.
Probably
Yeah, sorry. Sorry. Maybe I can
Yes,
add on
Janice?
also something. Yeah, so I actually also want to add on that for us, it's also interesting to understand more about the design behavior change and the mechanism of it. Because I think there's a lot of misconception that, under-resourced families are in their situations because they're not motivated to change. And some of us would think that is it because they don't want to work? Is it because of they're lazy to work, or they don't want to they don't want to save? But I think is where when we collaborate with and work in a DVC, we can understand the mechanism of what exactly lead to change, which what you said, it takes a while, it takes a period, and there are also different explanations of why some families are difficult to progress and move forward. So I think that aligns with our principle also, that we don't want to force families to change, or they are feel uncomfortable in the sense, but we really want to understand why they are in their situation. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, you can continue.
No,
Yeah,
thanks
and
for
maybe
sharing
I
that
can
point.
also
And
add.
yes,
Maybe
please, Yoke.
I think for us, that the aspect of why is very important, and that's partly from our perspective, we feel that it's important to understand the why so that you can design interventions that are actually going to be effective and impactful. So that's the entire motivation for why we want to share useful skills and tools that help people be able to analyze issues and get to the root causes of issues, whether it is in this case, savings or environmental change and so on.
Yeah. And I think at this point moving forward, we would really love, for the families themselves to be the ones really fronting and leading the behavior change solutions at this point. And I think we'll share a lot more later on that point as well. And probably, thanks for giving the background of that. And I think the audience will probably be also interested to understand our journey, DBC journey, and maybe Pean, you can move on to the next slide so that we can also give a broad context, of how we have navigated our DBC journey, without going into too much details, given the limited time that we have. But I thought it's also good for us to share, as a team, how we have really navigated the whole journey. Maybe I can just share the broad overview, and you can feel free to come in to jump in, to share more inputs from WISE, who has a lot more expertise in this area. Now we started the whole process is really very the whole journey is very process oriented, and we started from capacity building in behavior change that mentioned earlier, to building empathy, on issues that's faced by the families, and also the aspirations. Understanding aspirations through a mapping activity, and also the students conducting the family interviews, and using those information that we have to gather insights that will allow us to kind of identify factors that impact on the families in terms of the savings habits, and also the behavior change techniques that the students would be able to identify. And then finally to the whole idea of ideation and game prototyping, as well as trial games with the families, which is what you see in the picture in earlier. And Yoke, would you like to add maybe in terms of how you have also supported other organizations and other project teams in terms of utilizing some of these behavior change tools and techniques?
Yeah, I think in general, how we tend to support students as well as other organizations, individuals doing community projects is quite similar to fairly similar to what we did here. In this case, our involvement was with that theory aspect, providing training on concepts that would be useful we hope would be useful for the students to implement as they worked on their community project. So nearer the beginning of the journey, at the start of the project, or before they really started working with the families, we ran I can't remember how long it was really, a couple
2 days,
sessions
I think.
of workshops on behavior change concepts such as like the trans-theoretical model behavior change, different types of factors that influence behavior change. So in this case, we front-loaded the students with the theory and some exercises to understand the theory. And then once they got into that project design and implementation stage, we were having regular mentoring sessions with them as they were applying these theories to carry out their research and design and so on, just to work with them to ensure that they were applying the concepts in a way that was helpful, and then giving feedback to help guide them through that process of understanding the data that they're looking at, and then how they could use it to then propose a solution that would be as effective as possible.
Yeah, and I think the entire project journey, in that sense, given that process, the focus on the process, actually I think took the students about 9 months to work very closely with WISE and LCCS as well. And perhaps on a note on the project outcome, in terms of what we're looking at in collaboration with LCCS, is really that how the families that we're working with report changes in the way they think about savings, and the way they start or maintain their savings habits. And most of the families that we'll work with have actually been supported by LCCS. That would be on a 1-year financial savings scheme. And I think at this point, perhaps you can move on to share a little bit more, about the project outcomes. And Yoke, maybe you can move on to the next slide. And this is probably where I'll invite the panel to come in to share, on this note of project outcomes they're looking at in how the families have actually benefited in the process as well, is your observations, related to the changes that experienced by the families. Now, of course, we're mindful that the behavior change do take a period of time, but perhaps at this point to share your observations of how the families have shared with you what they feel about their engagement so far.
Yeah, okay. So
Janice?
So just now, as what Ling has said, is very focused on the people. So actually during the whole process, it took 9 months because we had to take time, and including the students, to actually interview the families one by one. And it's a long process because we don't want to end up at the point where we don't understand what the family is experiencing, what's their situation. That's why we want to engage them to find out more about the situation. And even through the process, I've already observed some changes. So I mentioned about the engagement one-to-one because I've already noted changes from the start already. Even during the initial engagement, when the students interview the families, I did see that most of them open up in terms of how they felt about savings. And actually, even before they played the game, with the board game that the students have created, they have already started on the savings scheme already. And they were already messaging me and my colleague that actually, when can we start on the savings? We are already interested to do it. And I think this is a progress that we have seen. Because actually for these families, we have been working with them for 3 years. And this year is the 3rd year that we're working with them. And I think initially, at the start, some of the families were not ready yet, but it could also be due to the situation that they are in at that point of time. But right now, they are more ready to start. And I think when the initial engagement from the students actually kickstarted conversations again, where they are interested into starting on this savings program. Yeah, so that's one of the changes that we've seen. Another change that we saw was during the engagement from the board game. So actually, one of my family actually told me that it's difficult for her to have a conversation with her child regarding savings because, the child is only primary school and they might not be able to understand the concept of saving. But during the board game, I could see her engaging with 3 of her children, 2 primary school and 1 secondary school. In Singapore context, primary school is maybe from 7 years old to 12 years old, and secondary school is 13 years old to 16 years old. So even during the process of playing the board game, I could see the family interacting with one another. And in one family engagement in particular, before the game started, we did ask questions about what did they think about savings. And for the child who is 10 years old, she would say, I don't know much about savings. She would say that she doesn't know anything about it. But after playing the game, after going through the whole process, we also asked the same question, just to have a check-in of how they feel about the game and savings. And the child would say that actually savings is very difficult. It's very difficult to save. because why there are a lot of expenses that she need to spend, through the game. So I think all these small changes that we experience in a very short period of time, to me, it is a success because they are aware, even children are aware of what savings are. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Janice. And I know that the families have very diverse, circumstantial factors that's affecting the families, are very, very issues. And I'm not sure whether, from the way you have spoken to the families, engaged with them, what were some of the different, changes experienced by perhaps the children and the adults in the families, or even across the families?
Okay, so changes, I think one change that we saw was that for the child, okay, so there was one, after the game, the child actually told the mother that the child would switch on the fan instead of the aircon to help her mother save money. Yeah, so I think this kind of change in a child, it's a significant change for in a short period of time that I see. Yeah, and of course, because we didn't measure the change a few months later, because we are still in the process of getting feedback. So I think this change that we saw is quite significant. Yeah.
And I think that's interesting because I think the children, given their age, they may not truly understand the concept of savings and they may not think of money terms, right? But what I hear from you is that, children in their engagement through the game, I think they were able to think about other ways or other formats of how they can save money. For example, like what you mentioned, the example is really switching off electricity and perhaps I think in that process they have understood how their mothers, how the adults in the families were making use of different ways to save money, for the family. Yeah, and thanks for sharing that. And maybe here I'll get either VIS or Yoke to, you may not have direct interaction with the families, through the process, unlike Janice and other caseworkers in LCCS, but perhaps, from your experience of driving some of these behavior change solutions, how do you think the game was able to support the families in terms of the project outcomes?
Right. I think that then there would be me that kind of it kind of some if you had an experience when being interviewed, sometimes we answer things how we do a certain action is different than how we actually do it. And then through the games, we actually play it on a safe space. So we actually act on it. And then it's more, it's reflecting our real life action, but also on a safe space. So it doesn't have a real consequences. So if I fail to save in the game, it doesn't mean I failed to save in my real life. So in that sense, it helps for us also, sometimes for researchers, to gain a real kind of actions, behavior, to record a real one. I mean, and then on the other side, it's also helping to start conversation, like Janice said before, because there is a game which kind of provide a middle ground for players to discuss with. So even if the game is different from real life, we can compare like how is it different, and then how the real life acts. So in that sense, it also helps us to talk about the discourse itself. And I think that's a few ways how game can provide like aid to this kind of hard topics to discuss with, especially children. Yeah.
And I think that the safe space point that you mentioned is really important, because I think from what Janice has shared earlier, it's also important for the adults in the family to have that safe space to drive conversations around savings, and then also the children would have some sense of psychological safety, to be very authentic, perhaps, in sharing what they really feel about, maybe some of the needs and even wants, and, maybe they're very authentic thoughts about, savings as well. Yeah, and I think from what you shared earlier, that's really how game design comes in to provide, that space for the conversations, to drive the conversations within the family. Yeah, and Yoke-bin, I know you play quite a key role in mentoring the students. And what are some of your thoughts, in terms of driving some of these project outcomes alongside with the students? And what are your observations in your process of working closely with them?
Well, not necessarily an observation, but I think something that got me thinking and reflecting on was what Janice mentioned about how when the students started interviewing the families, the families also started already expressing interest in savings, which I think raises a good point about how when students are involved with community projects, being youth, they could maybe change the dynamics of what's happening within the project, because students play a very different role to, for example, what how families might view caseworkers, right, versus students who are coming in to support and discuss. And I think also, like, similar to how that a board game might create a safe space, in a way, youth coming in and students coming in also might create that safe space for families and communities to maybe discuss certain issues. And yeah, I've also had similar experiences, like going into communities that, as a researcher, a more neutral party, and that also helps people open up. So I think that got me thinking about how it's worth maybe interrogating more and thinking more about how students could really play a valuable role in working with communities in a different way. And perhaps that is a lesson that we can also take back and think about. Then how can we work with students more strategically to be able to do more with communities?
Yeah, maybe I would like to also build on the point that you just mentioned, Yoke. And I remember Janice mentioned earlier on, in the conversation earlier, that the experience of working with families is actually quite different, because they may face different issues and challenges, and that can be very different for each family. So Janice, I'm not sure, maybe would you like to share your thoughts about how, there's no one-stop solution, right, for each of these families, and through the board game and through the engagement with students, what are your thoughts about, us working and then the students working very closely with the families as well on a more sustainable basis?
Yeah. So as you
given the
mentioned,
fact that there's no one-stop solution. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the beginning, we were facing some challenges in the sense that we were trying to find one solution in order to be able to cater to every single family. But I think we found that it's difficult because each family experience different situations, different experiences in terms of the very because human beings are so dynamic, right? So we are all experiencing different things. And that's where I think the board game has very open-ended questions in which we are able to use it as a tool to, in a sense, navigate the conversations along with the family. So because the questions are very open, that's why families at every stage are able to share their experiences with each other. It's very flexible in that sense. So I think that really helps in creating that conversation within families about savings, what they think about savings. And it's not so rigid and structured in that sense. And I'm also thinking, when you mentioned about psychological safety, because I was in also with the students when they interview the families, but I wasn't taking, the social workers were with the students, but the social workers were not taking lead. But the questions that the students used to ask the families provided them a safe space, in terms of they are more curious about how the family are like at the current moment, instead of giving very judgmental kind of questionings. Yeah, so I think that helped, whereby the board game itself, the question asked is very non-threatening to the family. They're able to engage with one another, have fun, by using the open-ended questions and questions that are just curious about who they are, yeah, and what situation are they in.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Janice. And I think this brings us very nicely, to probably the next part of our conversation, because apart from the project outcomes, I think we all agree that in this collaboration, we were very aligned in a sense that the human focus endeavor part, is very important to us. The human development part is very important to us, whether it's for the families we serve, for the students, even the staff ourselves, whether in our roles as from the non-profit organization, from a university, or even, for RCCS, that human focus element is very important to us. So I thought it's really important that we also spend some time to maybe share our experiences and thoughts about, apart from project outcomes, what were some of the important developmental outcomes that we observed. And what you see here was some of the, pictures that we took during the family interview sessions, where we really got to know the families a lot better, and they feel how they feel about savings, and they played the game, with us. If you can move on to the next slide, Yoke, we can get the panel maybe to share your thoughts about what the more significant developmental outcomes that you observe, and this could apply, both for the students and also for the families, and even for yourselves as well. Drawing on your own personal experiences and in the roles that you play in the entire project journey. And yes, I know you play an extremely important role in terms of the game design part. So would you like to share maybe some of your own, reflections or thoughts about what were some of the more developmental outcomes? Because I think you really came in at a very crucial point where the students were really stuck, in that sense.
Yeah. I guess from even when I came in, I can see the students already have a good understanding of the kind of different cases or complexities felt by families. So it's already there. We have different characters with different backgrounds instead of similar characters that have similar contexts. So each of them already has their own challenges and then their own goals and their own resources. But then it's I guess it's also we learn together how to kind of break down the complexities into more playable games, because it's just like translating from kind of their understandings to playable parts, components. And then other than that, I saw also a shifting from so we're talking about saving here, and then at first it looks like it's a individual challenges or like families challenge, but then as we kind of develop the game, it's more how do we also build a community around it, and then how each families can support each other. So and for example, like it could, like usually more low-income communities, low-income families form a community so they can support each other. And then I also see that, I mean, one of my observations that I really like is how this project evolves. I think at first game was not the original goal, and then it's also like starting from card game, so just a question prompt to get family talk to each other, and then or just to prompt conversations, and then it moves toward more like Monopoly board game style. And yeah, I think it's it changes, and it's not afraid to like throw away the old idea and then like embrace the new idea one. And I think that's one of the remarkable that I see in this project.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Yoke, would you like to add anything, in terms of the whole behavior change process and how the students, were able to really apply some of the tools that were shared with them?
Yeah, so I think, when we came in at the beginning, it was really about providing those skills and tools that might be useful for them in the project. So we had discussion together with Siew at SUSS about what some of these tools might be. So we focused a lot at the beginning on behavior change concepts and how you can apply them, as well as design thinking concepts and how you would apply them. And obviously these are very tangible, observable outcomes, because we can see, we shared that knowledge. Obviously that knowledge increased, and they were asked to apply that knowledge and skills, so they had a chance to practice. And those are the more observable development outcomes that we could see, very tangible ones. But I think from more wider perspective, we were not just there to see those, to help develop those tangible skills, but also through mentoring. I'm not sure we mentioned before, but apart from running those workshops, we were also then providing mentoring as the students were planning and implementing their projects. Okay, I think we did mention it, but also through that mentoring, facilitating and providing a space where students could develop that independent problem-solving mindset, right? So gaining that confidence to be able to look at data, analyze what's happening, look for problems or things to address, come up with solutions, maybe try them out, see how that works out, go back, iterate. And so we weren't there to sort of tell them what to do or how to necessarily apply the frameworks, but to give them the space to express their application skills and their creativity. Right. So I think right from the start, when we share the concepts, we don't say that these are concepts you have to use or have to use in a certain way, but are frameworks you can apply in a way that works for you and in that context. And I think this project was a very good example of how well that worked out, because none of us ever told them that, oh, you should be using creating a board game, but it was the students' own ideas to, and that was not even their first idea, right? I think the initial idea was more conversation cards, using cards to discuss conversations. But from there, they iterated on their own to say, okay, let's change the board game. And it turned out to be an excellent idea, and that wasn't any of us SUSS or LCCS or Y saying come out with a board game. It was them exercising their independent problem-solving muscle and creativity to come up with a solution that actually worked very well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Yoke. In fact, I will write on your point to share something on the students' behalf, because I think, given what Julivius mentioned earlier, I think the process of ideation and the prototyping was the most challenging for them, because game design was a totally new area for them, and they were definitely inexperienced. And this is really where I think Julivius really came in as a resource person to really support them in the process, right? And on that note, I think in the context of service learning, to provide that perspective, and for the students, I think they really benefited from the process of this new knowledge and new skills that they acquired, which was really important in the entire process of service learning. And on that note, there was really a new area of knowledge that they gained, and they really apply it. And you brought up the very important point earlier, that they also evolved from the idea of a conversation cards to the savings board game. And kudos to them on that, because I think they were able to really empathize with the different issues that the families were facing, that they also had different life priorities, and they were able to use this information game through the family interviews and to factor in the game design. So and this is how they came out with the different connect cards, that will allow the different families to share why they made certain decisions through, the game itself. And I guess on this note, for us to offer a perspective from SUSS, it is really a spirit of experiential learning and service learning, because at the end of the day, all the different stakeholders, whether you're a student, or even a staff, or even for community organizations serving the families, I guess we all need to embrace the mindset of a learner. And that's how we really move through this really iterative learning cycle of experience, reflection, thinking, and acting, that we really all navigated together and really were part of a community in that sense. And these were really the thoughts of the students that I thought I really wanted to share on their behalf as well. They were really motivated by the fact that they were actually part of this larger community. And they were really not alone, in this journey. They're able to work with different stakeholders, including the families that they were able to build a relationship with. Yeah. Yeah, perhaps at this point, I would like maybe Janice to share, your experience and observations about maybe the development outcomes, maybe even for the families, apart from the students as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Siew Ling. So actually, for us, we involved one of the youth who is actually part of the Project Lift families that we work with. And she's part of the family that already started on the savings program before this. Yeah, so she onboarded on the savings programs about 1 year ago, her family. So she involved her into this experience in working with other families. So she went along with the students to interview other families. And when we got feedback from her, how does she feel about being involved in this DBC program, she actually shared that she's very humbled by the experience because she herself get to understand what other families who needs more support are experiencing. Yeah, so I think that is a very good way of also involving our families into the work that we do, because we always believe in collaboration. That it's not just one way where we are, the one dictating the change that families should experience, but we also want the families to be on board in this kind of experiences. So I think that it's a very commendable part on the youth who join, because she's also taking part in this process, and she herself also she also told me that, wow, it's so difficult to save, now that she actually interviewed other families about their challenges, and she do understand about also how what her mother is also going through. So I think for us, having this opportunity to also involve the families into this experience is a learning point for us as well, and an opportunity. Yeah. And even for myself, I think as a social worker, having this very intentional program in engaging the families about savings, it helps to deepen our conversations with the families. I think initially at the start we had other priorities in that sense, where when we engage with families, it was more towards the challenges that they're facing in terms of their employment, relationships. So I think we prioritize in engaging the family on that. But for myself, in terms of savings, we only use tools such as INE, income and expenses, to work with the families, how much income they have per month. Then we will work through with the families, the expenses that they have per month. And at the end, we will minus off and see how much savings they are able to accumulate per month. So then we will have a conversation with the family of, are you able to, do you think you're comfortable or not to embark on this savings scheme? I felt that, even for me, it's a humbling experience, because I felt that initially, even without this DBC program, the conversation is very straightforward, just using the income expense tool. But with this program, where it's very intentional in engaging the families to understand their situation and what they think about saving, it's a learning point for me as well. Because I think for savings is tied to a person's value. How our relationship with money is tied to our values in life as well. So I think even the game itself, we do explore the person's values, who they are as a person, what's important to them, what matters to them. And that also help us to understand what is one's relationship with money. Yeah, so I think this whole experience of DBC helped me as a worker to have deeper conversations with families to expand their worldview on what saving. Yeah.
Yeah, and on that note, I think the youth perspective that you mentioned earlier is also a very salient point, because I think in the whole process of us working together, in this multi-stakeholder collaboration, is that I think at the end of the day, we don't really regard the families as beneficiaries, but they were actually a very important stakeholder in that process. And on that note, they actually play a very pivotal role, in contributing as well to this idea of education for the community, and even educating our students. And I remember the students also, shared with me that reflections that they were also very, very encouraged, by how resilient the families are despite the challenges they are. So on that note, I think they really played a very important role in terms of that, from a community development perspective of they are really the ones, teaching us a lot of life lessons in that sense, and how we can really support each other in that whole ecosystem of social support. Not just within the families, but even across the different families as well. Of course, drawing, from the experiences of families who have successfully, kind of graduated from the savings plan and were able to offer very valuable tips, for the families who have not onboarded their savings scheme. Even I myself, I really benefited from the process of how I've set certain priorities in terms of my own savings as well. Yeah, okay. So perhaps on this note, I think we still have some time. I'm also looking at the Q&A box for questions, and I think at this point, I don't see any questions as yet. And maybe I will get Yoke to maybe share some of your thoughts about this learning, tying in the development outcomes. Would you like to share anything else?
Yeah, thanks. I also had also realized halfway through our conversation that actually this program is a pilot. It's the first time that all of us have been working together on DVC, and it's not just the students that learn. I think for us WISE, we also learned a lot from this process and SUSS, right? Purely from the perspective of when we designed this program, it was supposed to be like a 6-month thing, run a workshop and then 6 months of mentoring, like once a month and then done. But I think it ended up being a 9-month thing, and that was because we learned from LCCS, we learned from the students along the way about what was how we could be useful in terms of guiding students through the process, how much mentoring they need at different stages, and that changed a lot throughout the process. I think especially looking at them gaining skills and applying them, of course, right at the beginning, there is a lot to learn. So that learning curve is very high. You learn all the theory and then you figure out how to apply it. And then once the students were able to apply the skills and gain more experience and confidence, then we perhaps let go a little bit more. But in this case, it was also that stage we reached that we talked about just now, about them wanting to design a board game, and there they identified, oh, there's a knowledge and skills gap, and then that's where we also come in again to then support a little bit more. And yeah, so it was sort of we learn from each other along the way, and we evolve and figure out how we can support each other to achieve these project outcomes and developmental outcomes.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I guess I can also add, in that sense that as a result of this engagement and really the focus on the human development part, I think one of our students continued to engage with one of the families, after the entire project ended, probably playing a slightly different role in terms of supporting the children from one of the families. Yeah. So I think there'll be a lot that we can learn, from Janice and the team in that sense of how we can really sustain these development outcomes. And probably this is scope that allows us to further look at the next iteration of this collaboration. And probably for the last 10 minutes, I think we can then on that note, kind of move very nicely to the last part of our conversation, which is probably the next phase of our collaboration and what we are looking forward next in that sense of really imagining, the possibilities moving forward. And perhaps in the context of this multi-stakeholder collaboration, what are some opportunities, or maybe even some of the challenges that you felt, given the lessons we've learned, and how we can better navigate that. So maybe Vias or Janice, would you like to add any of your thoughts here?
Yeah, maybe I can start then. I guess for me, kind of finalizing the board game itself. So it's I'm hoping that we can kind of make it official board game, and then we can play it across low income community, at least in Singapore. And then I'm dreaming that I can also take it back to Indonesia and then play it with low income community and work with other NGOs that already engage with them, and then see if it needs adjustment or we can already play it with them. But yeah, I guess that's from my perspective. Yes, I am a bias to game design because I'm a game designer. Thank you.
And I think definitely that there will be a next iteration of game design that we are all looking forward to. And I know that I think our CCS has also some exciting ideas in terms of how we can really take this board game forward with the families. And maybe this is also a shout out, to the audience who is listening in to us right now. If you'd like to collaborate with us, on the next iteration, whether in terms of the game design or any other aspects of the collaboration in this multi-stakeholder, please reach out to us. And Janice, would you like to go next?
Yes. Okay. So I think in future, we'll definitely use this board game to have initial engagement conversations with families about what's their approach towards saving. Because I really think having a board game is a very non-threatening kind of approach when we talk about money. And I think especially when we talk with under-resourced families, I think the whole conversation of money can be quite sensitive in that sense, where they already feeling powerless in the society, or when they approach to different agencies for financial assistance. When we talk about money, I think there might be some sense of shame on their end. But with the board game, it creates that sense of psychological safety, where it's not so directive, questioning them what they do with the money, but it can able to create that safe space. And I think it really works very well with children as well, in that sense that children at their age, they might not understand fully what the concept savings is about or money is about, but through the conversation, through the playing of game, they can have some context about it. Yeah, and I think moving on more than just using the tool with families, there's also possibilities of collaboration in other aspects of working families. In LCCS, we always encourage the community to gather together, and we actually do have events such as community conversations, where we invite different stakeholders in the community together with families to come together to find a solution, and not just being directed by the social workers or what we think should happen. So I think there will be possible chances of inviting maybe WISE or SUSS in future to have conversations with our families. Yeah, it might not be a 6 months program, a 9 months program, but it could just be that one time where we just invite everybody to brainstorm. Yeah, so I think this is something that we can also consider in future.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Now, before I invite all of you, the panel members, to kind of share, or conclude the session by, sharing your really personal takeaways, in terms of really rounding back to our theme about this multi-stakeholder stakeholder collaboration and really engaging our students, in innovating behavior change solutions with families. I do see at this point one question in the chat box, which is one limitation or challenge that we face in rolling out the game with family. Maybe I'll get either Yoke or Obvious or maybe Janice to quickly jump in here to share any one limitations or challenge that you see that you face? Janice, would there be any one specific challenge or limitation?
Yep. So when I was playing with two families with the board game, I think there was one challenge whereby maybe the younger kids, the age of maybe 5 to 10, it's difficult for them to play on their own. Yeah. So what we did was we actually pair them up with the adults. So instead of the children playing that by themselves, they actually pair with the adults as well. And I think that itself is also collaborating within the families that we want to encourage as well. Because when the adult is paired with the child, they are able to work together and come up with a plan together in order to, win the game. Or what I see is that, the adult supporting the child. Yeah. So I think even with the game itself, this is a good opportunity for the families to work together during the game as well. Yeah.
And perhaps adding on to add, I think what I hear from the students is that, when playing the games, somehow in the conversations, I think there's a very intuitive way, of driving the understanding in terms of either from what Janice shared, the adults guiding the younger ones, or even the younger ones were able to really educate themselves in terms of what does this mean, and then why did I make such a decision, or why did mom make such a decision in terms of playing the game itself. So maybe for the last 5 minutes, I'll probably get Yoke maybe to start off first by sharing, some conclusive remarks about rounding up this theme on this multi-stakeholder collaboration.
I think maybe the key takeaway that I will share is, within the context of this summit, in terms of the value that students can bring into the collaboration is, I think for me, maybe we underestimated the value that students could bring, and they really exceeded expectations in this case. So I think that's something important to recognize, and if we're able to really support students and give them the space to really express their potential, not just by equipping them with useful skills and tools they can use, but also guiding them and providing that space for them. Because in a lot of, I think, other projects that we might see, students are asked to come in and do like very specific tasks, very structured tasks, but not given that space to take initiative. I think if we can do more of that, not only will the students benefit, but also the communities we are working with will benefit as well.
Okay, how about Julivius?
Yeah.
Any final remarks from you?
Yeah, I think game in itself inherently expensive. So it's resource expensive. It's either time consuming, or it's like it drains your creativity in a sense. But and also on the other hand, it's very fulfilling when you get it done. So it felt like you're saving money, and then you buy a new phone at the end of the year, and it just brings joyful when it's done. But during the process, it was hard to me, at least. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Janice, how about Janice?
Yeah. Okay. So I think for us, is that in the context of the savings, breaking the poverty cycle or building asset is not just on the adults itself, but it's also the children where they work as a family. So I think, initially our solution is we always work with the adult, but I think with the dash of the board game, we are able to involve the children as well into the whole conversation about what the savings mean to them. So I think it's a good learning point, and also what Yoke said about collaborating with the students also bring a different perspective to the game. Because I think for social workers, sometimes we have a fixed perspective of families and working in families, but I think the students bring a different perspective to it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And the last minute, I guess I'll share something on the students' behalf, because I think in the context of this collaboration, they really have a very key role to play. and through the engagement with families, and thanks to WISE and thanks to LCCS who have guided them so much throughout the journey. And I think they saw that they had a key role to play as well in contributing to this ecosystem, this larger environment that under-resourced families can actually thrive in. And this is actually their social responsibility. So in playing up to this role, I think the context of the game that they designed and came out with really comes in as a very useful social engagement tool, for families to have these important conversations about savings, and they realize they've learned that the families need a support network to talk about some of these issues that might be sensitive. Yeah. And on this note, thank you so much to the audience who's been joining us for this journey. I think we have really enjoyed this session. I hope you have enjoyed this session as well. And I guess, Yoke, you can go on to the very last slide, in terms of getting in touch with us. If you'd like to continue the conversations, please feel free to reach out to any of us, to LCCS, to SUSS, or even WISE on this. And thank you so much. And to conclude, sharing, we have a video to share, and please enjoy the video. Thank you so much.
Please.